thank you for waiting. It's always a battle of the chronically prompt against the languorous. And to try and serve both those masters is difficult. I'm Jeffrey O'Brien, and I co-curate this spring series, the Holloway series in poetry, with Hilary Gravendike-Burl. And before we get tonight underway, I want to just tell you about a couple of other events that will be happening later in the semester in the series. Not on a Thursday, but on a Friday, March 21st at 6:30, Lynn Din will be here reading with Marissa Libin. And then on Thursday, April 24th at 6:30, Ariana Renes will be here reading with Angie Yuan. And then sort of both within the confines of the Holloway and without, our special celebration of the current Holloway poet in residence, who's here tonight, Lytle Shaw. That will happen on Thursday, May 1st, an auspicious day. And that will have an open reception after it as well. And if you would like to remind yourself of all these events, the best way to do that is to go to the Holloway website, which is holloway.english.berkeley.edu. So tonight we're extremely excited to have Erin Mouré here reading with our own Trang Cao. And first up we'll have Nashira Dernesh to introduce Trang Cao, and then Berkeley English Department grad student and great poet Swati Rana will introduce Erin Mouré. And then thereafter there'll be a really short Q&A. Erin has already been involved in high-level mentation since at least 4 o'clock, so we will only prevail upon her for a couple of questions, but that we will do. All right, thank you very much. So Nashira, sorry.
Good evening. I'm thrilled to be here tonight to introduce Trang Cao to you. In fact, I'm so thrilled I've come from Toronto just for the opportunity to have this chance to introduce her to you and to talk about her work this evening. Trang and I met in the creative writing program at York University, where she earned an honors BA in creative writing in English. We also worked together as editors for the literary journal Existere. I knew Trang was talented the first time I heard her read her poetry. The fact that she won the 3 most prestigious poetry prizes at our university, the Sorbera Award, the Judith Eve Gavortz Memorial Award, and the President's Prize, not to mention being published by several well-respected Canadian journals, only reinforce that fact. Now, Trang is in her 2nd year as a graduate student in South and Southeast Asian Studies here at Berkeley. Trang's poetry evokes a delicate clarity. Her lines are graceful, fluid. The rhythm reels out to hook the next visceral image. Her metaphors place the ordinary and elemental, river, plums, salt, within archetypal landscapes. These images, elegant, taut, and surprising, ferry us across to a terrain that is at once unfamiliar and recognizable. These poems are absolutely human, tender, grasping to hold what is already slipping from palms. Everything here is hanging by a thread, fragile, is about to be broken. But the fragility is balanced by a strength, an authenticity that looks steadily on when it would be easier to look away. These are large and little truths, but all are offered to the reader with the longing we share collectively and alone during this small life. To read Trang's poems is to shelter the ache in your chest because it reminds you of what it means to be alive, and it crushes even as it uplifts. Please join me in welcoming Trang.
Thank you, Nashira, for that really generous introduction. Your money is on the chair. I'm really, truly honored to be here this evening, to be introduced by Nashira Dernesh and to be reading with Erin Mouré, both poets of immense talent. And I want to thank the Holloway curators and committee for organizing this, because how great is it that we're all gathered here this evening just to celebrate poetry. Before I begin, if I'm reading really quickly, if you could just give me the sign, or the sign, then I'll try to slow down. Winter in a cupboard. This winter in a cupboard, not much to tell you. The moon a white howl, maneuver around back roads of empty blue bowls, cracked cups, where we touched, black-eyed Susans erupt, gold from my mouth. Sisters blur to foliage. Send word, the sinking is just the sun beating its way through underbrush, just grasses that cut the tongue. In the Orpheus myth, Eurydice is never usually given a voice. She's simply sort of the catalyst for Orpheus's songs and another woman lost by a backward glance. And in this next poem, I attempt to locate that particular experience. The Eurydice letters, incomplete. In one who is absent. Every part of him was different. Heart, a burnt, not hard tendon. When I grabbed his arm, words changed. Griffin, bird, beast, dreaming their escape. Orpheus torn for his song sung deeper. Gold currents poured from his throat until there was nothing, just echo, long corridor, a mouth floating down a river, empty, still empty, singing empty. The bees came, thousands to mourn him. Honey dripped from their tongues. All year long, they refused flowers, red. Even the Cassius of pink snow could not convince them of their own hunger, how they stung and stung. The head floating down the river, Basilicus, crowned with many winters. My prince, Astrus, the stars have fallen, long dark ahead. Here is a bridge, cross it. Hear my heart. Stop. There are no shores for this. Still there were days. In this asunder world, no wind, no sway, no heat, no water, no winter. You can go for days and never arrive at afternoon light on skin, what paper thirst, what blister and burn and turn yourself against you. Persephone is bent in the corner with her pomegranate beads, 6 jewels to the teeth, that hoarder. I begin to see only red, Orpheus red, a voice ebbs and lulls. I fall asleep between the hallways, red also. The daughters of Danaus have taught me how to collect water with a sieve. This grievous gesture goes on for hours. Bend, bow, scoop, weep, scoop. It is the sound of stars dying at the bottom of a well, or a single word emptying itself over the bones of ships. Okay. I seem to have a predilection for water songs, so this is one. Fisherman's Song. Little green sea, 13 years old, how I'd like to adopt you and send you to school over the bridge, to study tangerine and absinthe. How the sun would set in you, captured there by its own sick light, my 2 hands closing in on your tides, as shadows sharpen their eye teeth. She said bright, burnt things. That's a line from Anne Carson. After my father left, my mother, returning to her winter room, pulled the evening down around her. In mourning, she beat her brow against the pane and announced dully, it's spring. Let the crocus do their purple moaning, let daffodils thrust forward each singed and golden cup, and let the tulips cut the air with their hot colors. He won't come home, my dear, he won't come home. A cricket learns to drop one many-petaled note. This next poem is first in a series of many city poems, I think, that poets kind of are obsessed about. Cities 1, Brampton. There is only one road that leads in and out of this city, Hanson Road, of bitter foliage, my friend. Light and shade departed have left no address. But nightly, your dreams grow and fall there. They start off small, then swell to blue plums, persimmons. The coughing fits of old women shake them from the branches. In morning, you gather what is left hand over hand. A lost golden animal, you've no broom, no cup, no dustpan big enough. The blue plums turn to pit, persimmons, orange socket. Tây Ninh is a province in Vietnam, the country where I was born, but had never known firsthand before becoming an adult. Road to Tây Ninh. Throat lodged with that persimmon, sun overhead, you forget where you came from. Amid verdant bamboo mesh and women bent, wordless on the roadside. Excuse me. Clouds bite down on sky. Children no higher than a shoe tree lead water buffaloes to drinking holes, while gold leaves flutter to a burial. Ceremonies mean gnashing, knuckles, teeth, and brass, bells clamoring. The dead do not eat, but they do need money. You burn yellow paper, the most delicate of griefs, as if you could bribe entry from the keeper of Pearl Gate. Meet me at the golden stream, you say, in this far country, meaning the river Styx, and don't give in to forgetfulness, pressing 2 gold coins against my lips. But in every river village, a pregnant mistress waits on shores beyond the bridge, and there are no ferrymen. River days, on my father's return. His petaled sadness scatters vast lawns, wind wanders into other afternoons, as my father's voice walks the empty rooms of our house, tracing footsteps back from himself to himself. He only ends up in the cluttered boxes, attic of his loneliest thoughts, carrying a daughter through the Saigon markets, singing songs from the roof of his mouth, songs of rivers, shoes. If he is crying, it is because he has misplaced both our childhoods. Somewhere between the fruit stand in August, the village beyond the bridge, and spice wagons of cinnamon, peppercorn, anise, or perhaps green mangoes lament us in our passing lives. Papayas succumb to the rot of flesh, and the fishmonger's wife dreams only of a tempest. Smile and step lightly, he says, the scent of cloves upon his breath, and then a hangnail silence, small tongues pressed against the night. And I'm going to close this with Nashira's favorite poem. Thank you. A Life of Bees. A life of bees begins with a quick sting, the pin-prick of the moon at night, knowing you are not the favorite child. You hurdle the stairs, glass sentences, words like cherish, bent in awkward postures, how your sister grows more impossibly beautiful each day, mother with her secret tears breaking into river delta. Father cannot find himself again. Now oxen, rice fields, fish sauce, decanters in the living room. Baby brother steeped in childhood. And you climb heaps of bodies, mornings, clothes, awash in disappointment. There's something of a doorstep for you to cross over. There where the moonlight throws itself to the floor. Thank you.
Good evening. I pick up Erin Mouré's translation, Sheep's Vigil by a Fervent Person, and being a graduate student, I sit down to figure out the book. I will tally the sides of the translation, read the left side, the original in Fernando Pessoa's Portuguese, and compare it to the right side, Mouré's translation in English, to develop my reading of the book. I first figure out something is wrong with this plan when one line on the left comes out distinctly longer than one line on the right, which I think to myself, being a graduate student, must be a mistake. Pessoa writes, "E ando com ele a todo ahora," and Moure translates, "and go with God on Winnet or Vaughan Road or down Winona to No Frills, where Garrison Creek is, heading southward to the lake and America and the ocean and the lake head and the whales and Gibraltar and my heartbeat, fraying, and the high towers of Chicago and the road southeast to Albany, the graveyards where the workers lie, and Cook where I taught once, and my heartbeat fraying, and the emigrants from Poland, and I Love You, and Niagara Falls. Of course, at this point, I'm thinking I'm pretty sure Fernando Pessoa didn't shop at No Frills, which is a Canadian bulk discount supermarket store. So it's a lovely surprise, and it confounds my plan to find Moure going with Pessoa's God for a trip to the grocery store. In another poem titled The Humber is Pretty Fabulous, Really, Moure finds in the descent of Pessoa's Tejo across Spain through Portugal, out Lisbon to America, her own riverways, the movement of a creek under the avenue where she writes, the longer run of Ontario's Humber River. It comes to me out of the failure of my plan that Moure's work helps us set a better task for ourselves as readers of poetry. She writes at the start of the book, I translated Pessoa by responding to him as a person. Her translation is not a tallying of verbs, nouns, adverbs, but a conversation between two poets, with roots, yes, in one place or another, but quite free with their persons. Like Pessoa, Moure models this freedom by taking different names for different projects, her Galician name authoring Sheep's Vigil. In so doing, she not only confounds identity, but gives herself many entries into the social. Her 2002 book, O Cidadán, is one such entry. It is a collection organized by papers set in different places, alternating the document with the lyric and with the litany. Across these poems, she asks fabulous questions. Is the citizen a being who risks harm? Is citizenship really the willingness to defend a territory or an ideal? To where can you deport a citizen? In a poem titled Document 17, Sainte-Terre, Moure answers, what if the citizen is enactment and not appurtenance, being among, accueil, relation to others in a lieu, locality, Sainte-Terre, for we cannot avoid that we are localized as bodies. Is the body itself just a tangle of prosthetic gestures toward and against another, which creates time, therefore history? Moure answers by asking better questions and by showing us the way to them. This frank disclosure of thought approaches the order of revelation in her most recent book, O Cadoiro, which shows the work of an archive, itself an accrual of energy over time, but also its work upon the reader as writer and translator. For this book, she goes to Lisbon, to a collection of medieval Iberian songbooks in Galician Portuguese, and finds in these cantigas of love, in their saudade, or longing, the impulse for her own lyric verse. The book, quite frankly, makes me long for longing. It is organized around the figure of the lung and presents itself, in the words of one poem, as the record of how a language actually breathed its human, now vanished correlates. It is this vital necessity that Moure brings by presenting poetry as a mode of civic thought in a worldly country. Erin Mouré lives in Montreal, where she works as a translator and editor. She grew up in Alberta and lived for a time in Vancouver, where she first started writing poetry. Since then, she has authored several books of poetry, as well as translations from French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Galician. Her 1988 book, Furious, won the Governor General's Award for Poetry. Sheep's Vigil by a Fervent Person was published in 2001 and shortlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize and the Toronto Book Award. Last year, she published Charenton, a translation from the Galician lyric poems of Chus Pateau. Her recent works include O Cidadán, published in 2002, a finalist for the Governor General's Award, Little Theaters, shortlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize, and Befallen Eye, both published in 2005, and most recently, O Cadoiro, published last year. It is a great pleasure to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming Erin Mouré. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and I'd like to thank Trang for reading first, and Jeffrey O'Brien for organizing this event tonight, and thank Lisa Robertson as well for giving me great food and a place to stay and be and talk and disturb her, so she's not getting any of her work done. But it's been, it's great to be here, in fact, to be here again and to read to you. I'm going to be reading from a little bits from 4 books, all of which have already been mentioned, and I thought I would start. This one here is Charenton, I just say by Chuspato. You can tell the difference between them because mine look like theirs. So I'm going to read a little bit from all of them. I'm going to start by reading just 2 pages from Au Citadin. And in a sense, in so doing, I'm taking up from the last time I read here, which was almost 6 years ago, which was shortly after this book came out, and I came and read from this book. This is document 31, La Repubblica. And it starts, in fact, with a quote after the first 4 words. Recorded life learned as, considering that the right to use a regional or minority language in private and public life is an inalienable right conforming to the principles embodied in the United Nations International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and according to the spirit of the Council of Europe Convention for the Protection of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms. But I return with the unsayable. This is Clarice Lispector. The unsayable can be given me only through the failure of my language. Only when the construct falters do I reach what it could not accomplish. And in a call for the stranger, for the neighbor does only what we can already read. Lispector again, I can love only the unknown evidence of things and can add myself only to what I do not know. Only that is a real giving of the self. All this in the face of the French fright in the spring of '99 at signing a charter to protect regional European languages. Fear for its language of the Republic. Where did this fear come from, this Republic? For such charters so often give the right to speak a language without the right to have anyone listen. I was a timid fater, ipse, you a juridic festuns demeure. And there's a little footnote at the end that says, for and against Augustin's caritas, for it stabilizes zone disequilibriums. In embracing the neighbor, difference is ghosted over. Document 32, inviolable. When my language fails, only then can we detect signals that hearken to a porosity of borders or lability of zones across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, not just the visual, as in planetary noise. But first we have to suspend our need to see identity itself as saturate signal, obliterating all noise, following Lispector into a not yet. How a woman wanting to write can be a territorial impossibility, and reading, bodies or others, is always in itself a kind of weak signal communication, a process of tapping signals that scarcely rise off the natural noise floor. The noise of a system generated within itself. Think of Ingeborg Bachmann in her hotel rooms. Her unsettled acts were noises, fissures. To see her as citizen is indeed to know citizen as repository of harm, where harm is gendered too. Myths of violability, inviolability, volatility, utility, lability played out. In wars, women are territories, and territories are lieux de punition. A César, ok, de César. Bachmann in Rome. To interdepend, Clarice says. For such beauty to exist, you have to imagine a wall. This wall, is it high? No, vast. Of brick with buttresses shoring up its rhythm. In front of it, a green border marks a doorway lost in time. An older poet walks past here each morning, her emotions more or less like the building, boarded up, about to disintegrate. To her, doubts have the texture of gorges and the pent gasp of mouth to mouth. And as for her more or less poetic efforts, she's not sure if she should keep dragging this code through narrow and twisting alpine passes, or if she should persevere or not with the taxing exercise of shipwreck and rescue, if she should just give up all that has been obsession and justification for life. So now she sets soft greenery in front of you. It's moss that grows at the rim of sewer covers or in the geometrical quadrangles of flagstones. In fact, there's a sidewalk here. In the middle, the poet, devastated as an architecture, without acanthus, capital, fust, Doric, possibly even the building at 15 B Street in the strangest of towns, in a remote country. This poet was stopped short by a disappearance, by lack of energy, of projects, by the corrosion of years. Later, a first field of frost. The dream is of a remote bombardment. Tree roots overgrow the city's destruction. It dreams, the tree does, this bombardment, remote in time. Neither sap nor squirrel grasp what I know, that the forest flourishes over the rubble of a decimated city. As the tree dreams, so does a heart, in Baghdad, Vietnam, in shell-pocked Afghan ranges, on the coasts of Galicia, in Hiroshima. Galicia is a place in the northwest of Spain. It was colonized by many groups of people over time, but one of the groups was the Romans. And the most recent group is Spain, the Castilian part of Spain. 1. When I affirm they, my ancestors, had a home, idiom, territory, new vocables to describe any or all accident of topography, and I maintain I don't live on the earth as my ancestors did. I don't know any names, idiom, territory, other than forest, tree, field of grain. I'm not making a value judgment. I don't set myself up in opposition, nor do I consider myself a subject of progress. I say they were laborers tied to the triennial rotation of crops and before that to the glebe. I note a discharge of power, a paradigm shift. To codify emigration not simply as an assault on identity of we Galicians as a people, but also as a negation and search for freedom, resistance against horrific working conditions and freedom of new political conditions, conditions of life. Title of the poem's on the bottom, on the desire for mobility. 2. Explore the following discourses: the mercantile argument of the modern age, the romantic subject of the first industrial revolution, the poem machine of the avant-gardes, assembly line, Taylorism, value theory in the era of informational accumulation. Decide which kinds of individuation and poetic bodies produce and which scriptural prototypes block these propositions or are fundamentalist, nostalgic backwards. Which is to say, link production machines and gradients in the poem. As this poem, No Delicacies, by Ingeborg Bachmann did, with the Cold War at its point of highest tension. I have learned, and this is a quote from that poem, I have learned meaning with words that exist for the lowest class, hunger, dishonor, tears, darkness. Someone really should. Others should. My part, let it be lost. The vending machine for language intelligence could push its own button. Submerged plants tremble, Barbizon School, in the force of the river where batrachia once thrived. Literally, huge deactivated machines fertilize my CSO. My memories don't want immortality. I never listened to Sarah Nat, didn't see her, ever. I'm Sarah Nat when rain fills up my lungs, the text, and such pleasure, the void. A heart is an infinite of language. Inside it, cardio propels itself, 40 to 400 stenosphere crust like a drift of continents. Madam, is what you write representative? Nothing represents, it produces. It searches out meaning? Nothing means, it functions. Does it have to do with a metaphysical language? No, with a transcendental language. Ideological? No, material. Oedipal. No, schizophrenic. Imaginary. No, it has nothing to do with an imaginary idiom. It's a non-figurative language. Symbolic? No, real. Structural? No, machinic. Molar? Gregarious? No, molecular, micropsychic, and micrological. Expressive? Productive. The outside of the poem, its height, eye color, the sex to which it belongs, when it eats, sleeps, walks, is it different from when we say thought, I, consciousness? Does the poem have an inside, outside? And do all these words, intellect, mind, and reason, belong to the inside? Is it private, the language the poet uses when configuring the inside of the poem? Is there an outside? Is it private? Language is a labyrinth of pathways, a trafficking. An inner voice. We listen to this singular voice. We await orders, await instructions from this inner voice. But an internalized voice is made up of every written text, read by those eyes' voice, made up of all we've spoken, of all that is not verbal, audible. We await orders. Is this how we write? We say the poem is inspired. We listen to the inner voice, the poets. We await orders, instructions from this incarcerated voice, so inspired of the poet. We thank the deity for the concordance between symbol and thing, between language and things. Can somebody else besides me feel this pain? Is the language in which we express our feelings private? Am I writing in a private language? The swans, they're not here. It's too hot for them. Then I'll read you this Little Theatres, my book Little Theatres, has in the middle a section of the words of Elisa Sampedrin, who's I call her the theorist of Little Theatres. But I don't know if that's exactly right. In Little Theatres, said Elisa Sampedrin in 1991, there are but faces. Boots are faces. A table is a face. The grass stem has an expression which is facial. When Levinas said the face is not of the order of the scene, he was making the right connection, but backward. All of what is seen are faces. From an interview in the Faro de Vigo in 1981, when we first considered Little Theatres, we soon found ourselves obliged to throw down our costumes and our masks and makeup. We had to speak all the languages, even the made-up ones. It was hard at first seeing these languages take charge, even frightening a bit. Later, we stepped into them like water. In fact, that's all there's time for. Little Theatres is short. The protagonist doesn't have very much time to protagonize. The protagonist in Little Theatres, she said in that same interview, is most often language itself, and it has little time to act. That's the nature of Little Theatres. Still, Little Theatres doesn't try to make claims for reality. It doesn't have time to do much more than enact small fissures in time. It seems a bit credulous at first. The corpse lies down like a corpse. That's reality. But then it gets up again, suddenly, realizing it's forgotten to turn out the light. When the corpse lies down for the last time to be a corpse, we don't actually see it. The whole theater is dark. This is how reality presents itself in Little Theatres. We see a corpse sitting up, and then, decisively, not regretfully at all, getting up to turn the light off. And then this from the Theatre Medusa in 1981. Just because there are bookstores, you think people read. But look at what they read. This is not reading. Which is why I say that Little Theatres is urgent, because people have stopped reading altogether. In Little Theatres, the stone is about as stony as it can get without making the public's head suffer a blow. There's no mist of origins. Once the stone is stony, the play is done. The stone is stony. Do you get it? Why are you still sitting there? Critics have said that Little Theatres is unsatisfactory. Primarily this, unsatisfactory. But this is like saying the alphabet is unsatisfactory. Do you expect the alphabet to come up with words for you? Then this is something she said in 1998. Theatre needs hope to survive at the end of the millennium. This has often been said, but Little Theatres makes do with very little hope. It may be that of all the theatres, Little Theatres alone will pass over the frontier into the next millennium. Its passage may allow other theatres to follow. It's my hunch that in the next millennium, at least in its first years, hope is not going to count for much. That's when we'll most need Little Theatres. It's very conservative in its use of hope as fuel. Just read two poems from here. They're, after writing Au Citadin, which was a very dense and particular book to write, very wore me out actually, I decided to write in Galician for a while. And since I'm getting better, but at that time I was writing this book, I had the Galician of about a 10-year-old, which is still infinite, has infinite combinatory possibilities. So I decided to write a poem of homages to water. And I thought, like, well, the place where water is mostly stored in society is in the ingredients for borscht. So that these ingredients, I wrote a poem for each of them. So this is I'll read them to you. I'll read them twice, but I'll read them once in Galician and once in English. It says, homenagem ao mineral básico de borscht. Na remolacha hay algo de terra, algo de humedade, algo mineral e auga. A remolacha è deposito de auga, recipiente de auga, sangue de terra, sangue de cultivo, sangue azul de tanto encarnado. Tiven remolacha, quando tiven corpulencia, quando fun solo de terra, errando por la terra para terme auga. Umedecermi nas remolachas, cor da minha cor, coqueteria do meu coração. Homage to the basic mineral of borscht. In the beet, there is something of earth, something of humidity, something of humility, something mineral, and water. The beet is a reservoir of water, container of water, earth blood, blood cultivated, blue-blooded from so much carmine. I had beet when I had corpulence, when I was loam of the earth, wandering the earth so as to hold water, to saturate myself in beets, color of my color, shy coquetry of my cœur. This is homenage au mineral do repolho, homage to the mineral of cabbage. No repolho hay algo de voo aterrado, algo de teu. Atrás asas de repolho, que están dobradas e sobredobradas para aterrarlo, repousam ainda mais as, pensando no teu. Hay algo inconsciente no repolho. Nisso o repolho também tem auga, auga de tormenta, augas do teu. O repolho repleto de líquido. A sua tapa tormentada que não te desmente. Cuidado da cabeça se miras o repolho. Pensamentos das folhas pálidas cortadas na auga fervida. Há algo de motivo, de cansaço imenso, de mirada nunca acabada no espaço de uma vida, para dobrada e redobrada e sobredobrada, para tapar essas augas tormentadas, augas caladas, augas auguradas. do rapolo compartidas con nos, cos seres. In the cabbage, there's something of flight grounded, something of sky. Past the wings of the cabbage, which are folded and folded over to ground it, lie more wings, pensive with heaven. There's something unconscious in the cabbage. In this, the cabbage too holds water, storm water, waters from on high. The cabbage complete with liquid, its fierce covering that does not deny you. Watch out for your head if you look at a cabbage. What the pale leaves must be thinking, cut into boiling water. There is something votive, something of immense fatigue, of a gaze never ended in the space of a lifetime, but folded and refolded and folded over to cap those stormy waters, deep-struck waters, aquatic auguring of the cabbage shared with us, with beings. There's a long poem in here called The First Story of Latin, where two Latins clash, combine, and mix. One of the Latins is the Latin of Galicia, which is Galician, and one of them is my Latin, which is this language that I'm speaking now. It's and this is just a poem called Symmetry. Sempre is not a word to be used lightly, not in the Latin I know. For this we need a language that rings of water. Agasayo cortesia pataka amor. Passing over stones or off the roof tiles, carrying red soil from the leiras down past the shut mill, running into windows and soaking curtains, slow charcos spreading under the doors, continents adrift. E un petrolero affundido no mar. Me in green gumboots, knee dry. Yes, now I remember. In the picture, that's me, agasayo cortesia. I think so, wearing such high shoes. Pataka amor. It's kind of fun. Agasayo cortesia, pataka amor. That sound nice? It's way better in Galician, because in English it means present, like gift, courtesy, potato, love. It sounds better in Galician, doesn't it? That's why I didn't translate it. O Cadoiro has already been introduced to you, so I'm just going to read. Some of the poems in here are based from the Cantigas de Amigo, which are poems that have concrete images from the world in them. They were written by men, but in the voices of women, speaking to of a low-born woman, speaking to an ordinary man, her boyfriend, who usually she wasn't married to, and who had gone off to fight in the war, which, as we were saying earlier, in that time, it's, the wars were the Christians going around from one side to chase the Muslims out of somewhere. So this was in medieval times, honest. This is 626, 663, Ayres Carpancho. I'm going to Santiago to pray. Perhaps I'll see my love. I'm going to burn candles, and with such heartache, there I'll wait to see my love. In the sanctuary, I'll burn candles and I'll dance, if I see my love. In the sanctuary, I'll pray before lit candles, such heartache, dancing heartache, till I see my love. And I'll just read an email I got from a friend of mine after he'd read this book. I read this email and I thought, sounds strangely familiar. I'm going to Valparaiso too. Perhaps I'll touch my love. I love still Santiago anyway. I'm going to Valparaiso for some days. In the left hand, o Cadoiro. Na outro, a outra. Biografia de alguém outro, que outro trova ainda em mim. That's unright. I'm going to Valparaiso this weekend, Erin. Talvez roce a mia amor. I'll rest chez Andrea, plein de prostes. It's exact. In a hill face à la mer, anyway again. Mi amor mio, no mio roce esta vez, otra vez. Bicos e gracias e a hens. I don't know if I copied my poem from him or if he copied that from me. There are two poems in that section of the book that are actually translations. Most of them just take a little lines and play with the repetition. This is one of the ones that is actually translation. It was at the fountain where I washed my curls, mother, and where I did loosen them, and me, oh, loosened. It was at the spring where I rinsed my locks, mother, and where I did loosen them, and me, loosened. At the fountain where I did loosen my curls, there I knew, mother, one to lord over them, and me, loosened, oh. Before I from that place departed, loosened was I in the words he'd told me, and me, oh. Loosened. 652, number 689, Don Juan Suarez Coelho, and so I did appease them. You see, there's not much difference from medieval times and now. I am unhoused outside the door in love. Mother, can your own child love another more than she loves you? Light candles for me in the sanctuary, that the arches may light up and flicker. I am in love. Mother, I am in love. 774, number 831, Pero de Ponte. Some days I don't know why I was born. Not since I've seen you. The birds settle down in the field to eat seeds in the fall. But I can't settle. There's no soft white petal under my wing. Not since I've seen you. Monday, page 371, volume 4, as above. Reread. 992, number 979, Pero de Ponte. Does a flower sleep? Does a branch touched once by the bird tremble? I wish at times I could be touched by sleep, that I could sleep, that I could forget. I once walked into that river, branched out, trembling. What folly to have tried. Oh, Santiago. 811, number 870, Aeras Nunes Clerigo. The poets' names were so beautiful that these are my poems, but I appended them to the end of all the poems just because I wanted to kind of preserve these poets' names. And in the archive, there's all these numbers, and they're so nice, I put them in there too, so that all the poems look like they're signed translations of somebody else's work. No boatsman comes to my island. Actually, I was going to read this. This is just to show you the difference. I'm just going to make a quick, very bad translation, literally, of one of these poems. It's, I was waiting or seated, or like, not seated like this, but seated in the hermitage of San Simeon, and circled me the waves that were big, and me waiting for my friend. And will he come? Being in the hermitage before the altar, encircling me were the grand waves, the huge waves of the sea, and me waiting for my friend. Will he come? Encircling me the great waves that were big. There's no boatsman, and there's no rower, and me waiting for my friend. Will he come? Where are we here? And encircled me the waves of the high sea. There's no boatsman, and I don't know how to row. And me waiting for my friend. Will he come? There's no barquero, there's no boatsman and no rower. I'm going to die beautiful on the high seas. Me waiting for my friend. Will he come? There's no boatsman, and I don't know how to row. I'm going to die. Me, beautiful on the high sea. Me waiting for my friend. Will he come? So it's, no boatsman comes to my island, nor can I row. I'll die beautiful out at sea. A boat could bring you to this island. Why it doesn't, I don't know. you've died beautiful out at sea. I am at sea without you, this much I know. The waves are close to me. It's a season of storms. My love is not altered. That's number 1397, Maria Soldadera. There's a whole bunch of the numbers of the cantigas that are missing because there was one folio that somebody didn't do his homework and never copied it out. And so the numbers got skipped. And so I imagine that that job was actually the job of the one woman troubadour. It wasn't really a troubadour, she was a prostitute, known by various things, Baltera and Maria Soldadera. A soldadera was a profession of looking after soldiers. Let's see. This development of pt, pt to xt, followed by vocalization of the palatal, was characteristic of Celtic. Acceptar, Latin, becoming aceitar, Portuguese. I like this. Nobody's heard Celtic, but there's all these theories about it. And that's a quote from José Pedro Machado from Origens do Português in 1967, citing Edwin Williams from Latin to Portuguese, published in 1962, citing Georges Dautin, Manuel pour servir à l'étude de l'Antiquité celtique, 1906. So this is one way that, I hate to say it in this place, scholarship is produced. Everybody cites everybody talking about something that nobody's heard of or could possibly have direct access to, but enough citations and it becomes true. I'm available as a thesis advisor. I'm a freelance thesis advisor. It's like, but the Palatin speaking timbre, saying that the way that this language was vocalized, this Latin was vocalized, is why the Latin word is different from the Galician word. This made sense to me, that could be. And that the Palatin speaking timbre of a vanished language can enter another as accent. After traveling as far away as Canada on the back of a fish, feeding directly from its blood, the cyclostome, a lamprey, the lamprey, returns to the Rio Limia where it was born to seed its young before it dies. In the Portuguese writings, the cyclostome is said to be favored and succulent. In the English writings, it is said to be of little use to man. Constat du vendredi 30 janvier, realization of the 30th of January, Friday, that writing is not and can never be a prosthesis for memory. Derrida, l'archive est hypomnésique. And then 631-88, number 667, Dom Juan de Aouin, crossed out, devenu le sujet spectral. I'll read a couple of these poems at the end here. These ones that are the sewn texts at the end. Or there's French, you can look at them afterwards if you want. There's French text sewn over and in the middle of English text. My lovely, beautiful was how I saw you. I had such great une passion, retour à l'origine, aucun mal de, no more how I saw you. Simplement ainsi, ici, transfiguré, brûlé d'une passion. Beautiful was how great anguish, simplement ainsi. In great water. In great ache I live, my lovely one. These are poems from the Cantigas de Amor, which are more like the Provençal medieval repertoire, where they're kind of poems of courtly love, lyrics of courtly love, so that the troubadour, who's like, a jerk in the employment of the court, is writing these. The voice is the I who he's addressing is some highborn woman to whom he can't possibly have access to, and whom the he voice perceives disdains him. And then basically there's no concrete images. In these other poems there's ships and shirts and deer and all kinds of things. But in these poems there's no concrete images. It's just like solid whining. And what I do with these is I've made these, like trying to read them is a bit hard too. And then they actually did, the spelling was not regulated in Portuguese when these were written. And because in Portuguese, the end of a word mushes into the beginning of the next word. And if you get any sort of a pause at all, it's in the middle of the word. That's how they wrote half the time. They wrote exactly how they speak. Like in seeing some of these poems written down, I thought, that's why it's so hard to understand Portuguese, is because they still talk like that on the continent anyways, you know. But they would spell the words. The end of the word would be at the beginning of the word, and then the beginning of the next word would be at the end of this word. And then there'd be a space and then the next word. So that sometimes it was a bit more regular than that, but sometimes it was very hard to read. So I made these poems that were very, to transmit my visual experience of looking at the poems, really. What the result is that very bad translations. So bad that nobody would ever let me call them translations. But they're interesting texts to me. And I kind of liked the whining after a while. In great ache I live, my lovely one, in which God cares not to give me consolation and desires my death. And to me it would be best, vivace ses héritiers. And for my ill if I hang on, chaque fois ne montrer qu'un spectre. My ill to win from you, my lovely one, your care. Of me, if to you I cause disgust, and thus it seems I am to die, as my death draws near me. And never may I seize consolation, nor expect it. D'un alphabet et d'une langue, on ne peut pas y croire. From anywhere in the world, and well I know, my lovely one, that thus I'll die, for thus it is your pleasure, and thus this you thus may carry out. And if to you I merit death, traduction de tout ceci, la croyance d'un statut possible, au temps des frères. To you I merit, if to you I merit death, but for God's sake act with care, for all is in your power. My lovely one, I ask you, on ne peut pas y croire, for seeking to serve you only. Haute conspect was it, but to have death take me, LX, V111, 111,2, Nuno Rodriguez de Candaray. Just one last one here then. And then a choose pato. I go, my beauty, to serve the king. For you, where I did pine, I'll go for love, for love, for love. For love, for love, désir et trouble de l'archive qui inscrit. For you, my lovely one, aucun rapport avec l'enregistrement. Performative à venir. I'm going to the court to dwell. For you and there to pine I go. For love, for love, for love. Papa, papa. And if I see you not, what will I do? Alors la répétition, l'injonction de mémoire, dans tous les cas, terminant. And if I see you not, what will I do? Caring for you so as to die for you. Désir et trouble de l'archive. For love, for love, for love, love, love. CCL XXX 14236-1 Pedro and Solazo and Solaz. They were also, there's a lot of repetitions in the poems, and the scribes were really lazy. So they would just kind of fluff off the ends. If it repeated, they would just throw a few of the letters that were in there, and they would just leave the words out. So that's that strange little book. Oh, that's not the right page. Are you, madam, a person who writes for other people? No, I'm not a person who writes for other people. So then, who do you write for? I write because language imposes itself on me, as it does on others. No, not as it does on all others. Many others don't produce language. This obligation, is it a means of parturition? No, it's simply gallantry. It presents itself to you as an act of love, or as a passion as a building might present itself, a moral act, an ache, a pain. Is its fondness returned? Insofar as my talent permits. You write then for everyone. No, not for everyone, for some, for those who decide to accompany me on the adventure. But how exactly do you and your affability win out? The same way the Duke of Nemours prevailed before his love. That is, with persistence, the most violent, least natural, and steeliest in the world. A book weighs nothing. On a scale for weighing bodies, put the book down and its needling is scarcely perceptible. Dream of Wittgensteinian landscape. Non-mother stone. Writing. 300 meters in free fall. Volume, 3,475 square kilometers. Inner zone, radio, 1,255 kilometers squared, solid or crystalline. Composition, probably iron and nickel. Temperature, 2,200 to 2,250 degrees centigrade. Pressure, 3 or 4 million times that of the atmosphere at sea level. Sensation, entirely pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, any questions for Ms. Mouré? In any language.
Even languages I don't know.
Who feels the pressure most? I do. I wasn't at the translation seminar, so I don't know if this is something that you covered. But
Oh yeah, we covered it.
okay. All right, you're dismissed.
No, I'm kidding.
At the end of Okadoiro, which means little waterfall?
Means
right?
waterfall.
Waterfall, okay.
It means, etymologically, it means the place where falling is made. But it's a word for waterfall.
That's a better definition. But in the postface, you mention you include a Dante quote, right, from De Vulgaris Eloquentia, which is important to Giorgio Agamben, also his end of the poem
which is
essay.
where I read it, really.
Right, and then you go on to talk about poetry being a form of falling. So of course, the postface must relate to your choice of title. And I wonder if you could just talk in general about how and why poetry is falling for you.
Well, I think it's, it's, if you're it's like I said in the postface, anybody who's going to write poetry has to be prepared to fall down, like a waterfall. Just that you have to take risks. You can't write poetry that's interesting to write, which is me. Like my first objective in writing poetry is I have fun, and you can't write things that stand out in any way that don't take a risk somehow. And when you take a risk, you risk falling down.
So is the nethermost space in the poem where you're putting these invented names and actual names and even a title at one point, right? Is that related to falling as well, that bottommost space in the poem?
The bottommost space? I don't know. What's the bottommost space?
The bottom of the page.
Oh, okay. No, I've never thought of it that way.
Okay, I do.
That's okay. I've never thought of it that way.
I'm wondering, since you read from those sewn poems, which I really,
The which poems?
the sewed
The sewn poems, right? Yeah, yeah.
which I really loved. If you could talk to everyone a little bit about the relationship between the French text and the English text, and sort of set it up for us a little bit for people who haven't seen those yet. And if you haven't seen them, you should come up and look at them because they're really beautiful.
Well, they were, as I was reading, I was in Lisbon reading these poems because I realized I could read, if I could read modern Galician, I could read medieval Galician Portuguese, the root language of modern Galician and of modern Portuguese. So I went to read them, and I brought 2 books with me to read, actually. One of them was, because I knew I was going to work in an archive. So one book I brought with me to read was Jacques Derrita's Mal d'Archives, which is translated into English, Archive Fever, which is, it doesn't, it says part of it, but it doesn't say everything. And the other book was actually L'archéologie du savoir of Foucault, because I thought, well, I'm doing something archaeological, and I'm going back into an old knowledge, and I'm going into an archive, so I'll read these two books at the same time. Anyways, in reading most of the poems of those Cantigas de Amor, those whining poems, and I had a hard time at first digesting and trying to read through them, because I was like, you guys quit whining? I found myself really impatient and irritated by the poems. But I made myself keep reading through them. And after a while, the other things started to stand out. It's sort of that they didn't seem so much like wallpaper. I started to see pictures in the wallpaper and see things happening in it. And the kind of repetitions and the way they played and the way you could tell sometimes they couldn't possibly be taking themselves seriously, interested me. At the same time, when I was reading Maldarchi, when I was reading Derrida, I realized like the rhythms in Derrida are exactly like the Cantigas de Amor. They're exactly like, it has the same rhythm, you know, it's the same kind of extended structures that roll back on themselves. And I'm sure that I saw that. Nobody else has ever seen that, because nobody else has ever read Maldarchi while reading 1,693 poems in medieval Galician Portuguese. So I'm sure that one thing inflected the other, one reading inflected the other, as readings do, if you read two things beside each other. But I started taking out all these little bits, playing with the lexicon of Derrida, and I'd play it together with it and mush it up and make these little bits of text. And I realized it still sounded like Derrida, that no matter how much you mutilated the text and re-put it back together, it still sounded like Derrida. And you couldn't even get rid of the subject matter. It was just like, I thought, no wonder he's so amazing. Like, he did that to one of my poems. Like, you know, no more interest. So I was playing with those things. And somehow I wanted these two texts to be able to relate to each other. And I spent some time trying to figure out how to have these texts read against each other. And that's how I started at one point, as in an effort to try to figure out what to do with them. Well, at one point I went to Lisa Robertson's house in France, and all these little strips, I rolled them up and stuck them in the cracks in the wall. and then took them out again. That's why some of them are in such rough shape. Like the ones that look like that were in her wall. But then, I mean, that didn't actually help me either. I was hoping for a revelation. I mean, you go to Lisa Robertson's house in France, you expect at least a revelation. But then I don't know, then I was playing with boxes on the computer and putting them in, and I was like, no, it's got to be, the relation is not flat like that. And so I sewed one, and that was when, like as I was telling you this afternoon, that Ben Lerner from No asked me if I had some poems, and I said, oh, I have nothing, but I just did this today. And I sent him a JPEG of it, took a picture of it and sent it to him and said, you can publish that. Like. And he wrote back and said, do you have 10 of those? So I made some more for Ben. Anyway, that's how they came about. Thank you. Is that great? Is that good there, Hillary? Okay. She likes that story. She wanted to hear it again. Anybody else have a comment, a thought?
I think Pound at the Hamilton College had just ran into someone who was interested in medieval Portuguese, which is how he got there. How did you get there?
Well, Pound was medieval French, though. Not Portuguese. How did I get there? Well, because I learned Galician. How did I learn Galician? Why did I do that? Oh, yeah. I learned Galician just because it's fun to learn languages. And then after I discovered, with the Pessoa, actually, I discovered that I bought this bilingual edition of Pessoa, of Cairo's poems there, and I realized I could read the Portuguese, because they're so close. So, but then I went to read the medieval things just because I could, because you can read. If you can read modern Galician or modern Portuguese, you can read the medieval poems as well as anybody else. And so I just found out, well, they're in the National Library in Lisbon, and there's a copy of the manuscripts and stuff at the Gulbenkian, and the world-renowned José Blanco, the bibliographer of Pessoa, was at the Gulbenkian then, and he had come across Sheep's Vigil. And so I wrote to him and I said, well, I think I'm going to come there and read these poems. So, I mean, he set me up so that I could work in the Gulbenkian Library, and the Gulbenkian paid for a hotel for me so I could stay there and read these poems. And I just thought, well, a person should read if you're going to read Galician or Portuguese, you should read these poems before you die. And then I thought, why wait? Go now. And so I went on a grant from MasterCard. No, I had to pay that back. Yeah. I just went because I could, and I just thought by looking at them, I could look at them, and I didn't even know if I'd be able to read them because they're all scribbly and scrawly, but I thought maybe it'll be interesting. I'm going to make myself go and read all 1,693 poems and see what happens, and that was Ocadoiro was what happened.
All right, that seems a good place to stop. So thank you to both poets.
Thank you.
And please come forward and look at all the books and perhaps retire one from the marketplace.